He didn't leave me money. He didn't leave me a house or a car or anything you could put in a box. He left me a single sentence. And that sentence has been living inside my chest ever since, reshaping every decision, every morning, every moment I am tempted to waste. I was 29 years old the night I heard those words. And if I am being completely honest with you, which is the only way this story is worth telling, I was also completely lost. Not the dramatic kind of lost that makes for a good movie. The quiet, everyday kind. The kind where you wake up, go through the motions, scroll the phone, go to sleep, and call it a life. I had no idea what was coming. I had no idea that a man I had only known for 18 months was about to hand me the thing I had been missing for years. His name was Walter Briggs. He was 78 years old, and he lived 3 houses down from the apartment the narrator had rented when he first moved to a quiet town in Ohio after a failed attempt at building a life in the city. Walter had a front porch he never wasted. Every morning at 6:15, he was out there, coffee in hand, watching the street come alive. The first time they passed each other, Walter simply nodded. The second time, he said good morning like he meant it. The third time, he held up a second coffee cup and said, without any preamble at all, that he had made too much and hated waste. That was how it started. Over coffee, on a porch, without any grand intention on either side. Walter had been a civil engineer for 43 years. He had built bridges, actual bridges, the kind cars drive over, in 6 different states. He had been married to the same woman for 51 years before she passed. He had 2 children who called every Sunday. He did not brag about any of this. The narrator learned it piece by piece, the way you learn things about a person when you simply show up and listen. The mornings became a rhythm. Not every day. Walter was not the kind of man who made things feel like obligation, but most days, when the weather allowed, they sat on that porch and talked. Or, more accurately, the narrator talked and Walter listened in the particular way that only someone who has truly heard a lot of people can listen. He did not offer quick fixes. He did not say what he thought you wanted to hear. He asked questions that had a habit of following you home long after the conversation ended. One morning, Walter asked what the narrator actually wanted to do with his life. Not what he was doing for money, not what his parents had hoped for, what he actually wanted. The narrator started 3 different sentences and finished none of them. Walter nodded slowly, like that answer told him exactly what he needed to know. He said that most people spend their most energetic years answering other people's questions about their life instead of asking their own. Then he refilled his coffee and let the silence do the rest. What Walter did not fully know, and what the narrator had not told him, was how deep the drifting had gone. For the past 4 years, the narrator had been what the world politely calls figuring it out, and what the world privately knows means going nowhere slowly. He had started 2 businesses that dissolved before they had names. He had applied for a dozen jobs he did not want, to afford a lifestyle that did not make him happy. He spent his evenings on his phone, not learning, not creating, not connecting with anyone in a real way, just consuming. Content, comments, clips, reels, an endless river of other people's highlights that made his own life feel particularly dim by comparison. He was not depressed in a clinical way. He was distracted in a civilizational way. There is a difference that nobody talks about enough. Depression is an illness. What the narrator had was something more common and perhaps more dangerous. The comfortable numbness of a man who had quietly agreed to let his potential stay unused because using it would require risk, and risk required courage, and courage was harder to summon than another hour of scrolling. He knew, somewhere underneath all of it, that he was wasting something. He just could not seem to stop. What kept the porch mornings alive was precisely that they were the 1 hour of the day when he was not performing and not pretending. Walter did not know his resume or his failures. Walter knew him the way a person gets known when you simply share the same quiet time, day after day, without an agenda. And without meaning to, without any lecture or intervention, those mornings were slowly becoming the steadiest thing in his week. The call came on a Thursday morning in late November. One of Walter's children, his daughter, Sandra, had found the narrator's number on a notepad on Walter's kitchen counter, under the word neighbor written in Walter's careful engineer's handwriting. She said he had been admitted 2 days ago. She said he had been asking for him. That detail, the asking, stayed in the narrator's body the entire drive to the hospital, a weight that had nothing to do with distance. Walter's room was quieter than expected. His daughter sat in the corner with a paperback she was not reading. Walter was in the bed with the particular stillness of someone who had stopped fighting the circumstance and arrived somewhere deeper. His eyes were open. When the narrator walked in, Walter looked at him with an expression that was not sadness and not relief. It was recognition, the way old friends look at each other when there is no pretending left to do. They talked for about 20 minutes. Or Walter talked, in the slow, considered way that a person does when words have become precious because the supply is visibly limited. He talked about the bridges, about the satisfaction of building something that holds weight, about his wife, about the Sunday calls from his children. He talked the way a man talks when he is not trying to impress anyone and does not need to. And then he paused. The kind of pause that older people use when they are deciding whether to say the true thing or the comfortable one. He looked at the narrator directly. He said there was something he had been meaning to say for a while. The kind of thing you wait to say until you are sure it will be heard, and not just politely received. Walter said, "I spent the first 40 years of my life waiting to be ready. And what I know now that I could not see then, is that ready is not a place you arrive at. It is a lie you tell yourself to stay comfortable. The bridge does not get built by the engineer who is waiting to feel confident. It gets built by the one who starts laying the first beam and figures out the fear along the way. You are not lost, son. You are just waiting. And time," he said, with the particular authority of someone who had very little of it left, "time does not wait with you." He did not say it dramatically. He did not raise his voice or place a hand on the narrator's shoulder. He said it the way Walter said everything, calmly, matter-of-factly, like a man who had earned the right to simplicity. And then he closed his eyes. Not in a final way, he would live another 9 days, but in the way that said he was tired and had said the thing that needed saying, and the rest was up to the person listening. The narrator drove home in silence. He did not turn on music. He did not check his phone at the red lights the way he usually did. He let the word sit. Ready is not a place you arrive at. It is a lie you tell yourself to stay comfortable. He had heard things like this before, in podcasts, in articles, in books he had half-read. But hearing it from Walter, in that room, at that hour, it did not land like information. It landed like a verdict. Walter passed 9 days later. Sandra sent a message. 3 words, "He went peacefully." The narrator sat with his phone in his hand for a long time after reading that. He thought about the porch. He thought about the coffee. He thought about all the mornings he had shown up without knowing he was doing something important. And he made a decision, not a dramatic one, not the kind that gets announced, but the quiet, private kind. He was going to stop waiting. The first thing he did was write down the one thing he had been avoiding starting for 2 years. Not a plan, just a first step. One thing. He told himself he did not need to feel ready to do it. He told himself what Walter had told him, and this time he let himself believe it. He started that morning. Not perfectly, not confidently. He started the way Walter said the bridges got built, by laying the first beam and figuring out the fear in motion. The weeks that followed were not magic. He still had doubt. He still had days where the old gravity of comfort pulled him back toward the couch and the scroll and the comfortable nothing. But something had changed in the architecture of those moments. Before Walter's words, the doubt felt like a stop sign, evidence that he was not ready, proof that he should wait for the right time. After those words, the doubt felt like what it actually was, just weather. Something you move through rather than something you wait for to pass before living. He went back to the porch. Not to sit in it. He could not do that. But he stood in front of Walter's house one morning, 6 weeks after the funeral, with a coffee in his hand, and he talked out loud to the empty chair. He thanked him. He told him he had started. He told him it was going slowly and messily and that he had no idea if it would work. And he told him that for the first time in years, that uncertainty felt like living instead of like failure. Then he walked to his own place and got back to work. There are things that Walter's life and Walter's words teach that cannot be learned from a productivity video or a motivational reel. The first is this: waiting for readiness is not patience. It is fear in a costume. Readiness is not a prerequisite for action. It is a byproduct of it. Every person who has ever built anything real started before they were ready, because the version of ready they imagined was never going to arrive on its own. The courage is in the starting. The confidence is what follows. The second lesson is about distraction. The narrator spent 4 years of his life, 4 years of genuine, irreplaceable, never-returning years, consuming instead of creating. The phone was not the villain. The phone was just the most convenient exit from the discomfort of building. Every time the work got hard, every time the silence of an empty notebook became too heavy, the phone provided an immediate escape. The lesson is not to throw the phone away. The lesson is to recognize the pattern for exactly what it is: a choice to trade your future for a comfortable right now. The third lesson is about the people who are still here. Walter was available for 18 months, 3 houses down, and the narrator had almost let that window close without walking through it properly. The lesson is not sentimental, it is urgent. The people in your life who carry real wisdom, real perspective, real lived knowledge about how time moves and what it costs, they are not always going to be there. Some of them are sitting on a porch right now, waiting for someone to show up with a second coffee and enough quiet to really listen. The fourth lesson Walter never stated directly but demonstrated daily: the quality of a life is not measured by scale. Walter had not changed the world. He had built bridges, raised children, loved one woman for half a century, and made coffee for a lost neighbor every morning for 18 months. None of that would appear in a news article. All of it constituted a life of meaning. The size of the impact is not what you get to control. The quality of your presence, in your work, in your relationships, in the ordinary moments, that is entirely yours to choose. And the fifth lesson, the one that lives closest to the bone, is about time. Not time as an abstract philosophical concept. Time as the actual, physical, countable days of your actual life. Walter had been 29 once. He had been lost once. He had also been 78 in a hospital room, with 9 days left and a neighbor he was trying to send forward with something useful. The distance between those two versions of a person is not abstract. It is real. It is coming. And the only question that matters is what you decide to do in the space between them. The narrator still lives in the same town. He passes Walter's house every morning. The new family who moved in has put a bird feeder in the yard, something Walter would have approved of, the narrator thinks. He does not stop and stand at the porch anymore. But he nods at it, the way Walter used to nod at him on those early mornings. The kind of nod that says, "I see you. I know. Keep going." He started the thing he had been avoiding. He finished it 6 months later. It was not perfect. It was not celebrated. But it was real, and it was his, and he did it without waiting until he was ready, because he finally knew what that waiting actually cost. He thought of Walter every time the doubt arrived. Not as a ghostly comfort. Walter was not the kind of man who would have appreciated that, but as a calibration. A reminder of what a wasted year actually looks like from the other end of a life. Walter did not leave him money. He did not leave him a house or a title or anything with a number attached to it. He left him a sentence. And some sentences, when they arrive at the right moment from the right person, do not just sit in memory. They build things. They build the version of you that was always waiting to exist. Waiting, it turns out, not for the perfect conditions, but only for a single quiet morning when someone looked you in the eye and told you the truth. Ready is not a place you arrive at. It is a lie you tell yourself to stay comfortable. Walter Briggs said that at 78, with 9 days left, in a hospital room in Ohio. It has been true every single morning since. If this story stayed with you, if something in it felt like it was meant for where you are right now, subscribe for more stories that change how you see life. Because the right story at the right moment is not just entertainment. It is the thing that gets you off the porch and back to the work that only you can do.